Oh, how you doing, mate?
I'm okay. I feel like my own applications need updating, to be honest. So it's kind of ironic we're talking about sleep, being heavily sleep deprived today.
Oh man, I know. Well, I mean, I thought we'd kick off by just giving people a little background on our sleep because, I mean, we're both in a similar situation at the moment whereby we've got young children, new fathers, and so sleep is hard to come by at the best of times. But obviously, we're not just going to be talking about parenthood and all the rest of it, even though that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
So look, everyone that's joined, thank you so much for joining. First of all, I was saying at the beginning of the last one that sleep hygiene is something that's kind of discussed a lot. There's a lot of articles out there about sleep hygiene and that you need to have the room at a certain temperature and you need to have a cool shower and you need to detech and all the rest of it, which is all fantastic advice. But this discussion is going to be more about the sort of mindset of sleep. I'm sure we'll touch on some of those things as well. Johnny, if you're not aware, is our mindfulness coach. We've been working with Johnny for over 4 years now, and Johnny's helped Mark and myself personally, but also delivered loads of amazing workshops and morning mindset sessions and all the rest of it for our clients. So really excited to have you on, Johnny. So look, let's start off with your sleep CV. So
Okay.
I want to know your sleep background. Okay, give me sort of the main points throughout your life.
My own sleep background. Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, starting with my sort of expertise in this area, I'm a therapist. I work in private practice in the NHS as well, and so sleep is sort of bread and butter for me with clients. It's something I'll tackle right away. We'll always look at it. And as you've said, actually, many people are doing all the right things and yet they still can't sleep. So I think, this is a really good discussion. My own sleep, as you hinted at the beginning, I've had 16 months now of sleep deprivation. So I'm understanding firsthand what it's like to have, they talk about your amygdala, your fear center of your brain is 60% more reactive when you're sleep deprived. And I certainly experienced that. So, I think my own experience with sleep more generally, though, is that I can sleep very well. I can, I'm a sort of head hits the pillow kind of guy. And so when I have the opportunity, I can sleep. But I have had times in my life when I've struggled with sleep. I've had anxiety and depression in the past, and that, can really disrupt your sleep. So I've had periods where I couldn't fall asleep. I've had periods where I would wake up a lot in the night. And I've had all of those sort of variations. So I kind of understand what it's like to struggle with it. And yet, I have some tools that I think are very helpful and certainly help me sleep. So yeah, I mean, that's probably an overview. I can
And
sort
as
of
a
say
child,
now.
did you sleep all right as a child?
I slept mostly really well as a child. Actually, I don't know as a baby. No, as a baby, I was bad. I was bad, not as bad as Ralph, but I was pretty bad as a baby, I think. And then I had long periods of being pretty good, but I do remember sometimes when because my anxiety started as a child, and I had some periods where I couldn't sleep as a child and things. So I definitely had some difficult times. But mostly, if you took my sleep as a whole, it's pretty consistently good and easy to fall asleep. I've just had these little periods of time where it's been difficult. How about you, Rob? What's your sleep like when you're not being disrupted?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, I guess. If you go back to when I was much younger, I used to get quite bad night terrors, and so I'd
Yeah,
wake up sort
yeah,
of screaming and all the rest of it, and have all these crazy dreams and a very very animated sort of brain when I was much younger. That kind of moved on to I'd get bouts of sort of sleep paralysis. Have you ever had sleep
yes,
paralysis?
yes. I have had
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
which is
yeah,
horrifying. The first
yes,
the first time I had it, it was honestly one of the scariest experiences
yeah,
of my life,
yeah,
whereby you think you've woken up, but you're kind of in this sort of hazy half
yeah,
sleep. But you think
yeah,
you're awake,
yeah,
and then I was having I thought that there were people coming in the room and coming up to me and all the rest of it, and I couldn't move. I'm trying to shout, I'm trying to move, and you can't do it, and you can either fall asleep again or try and wake yourself up, and it kind of goes in this circle. That was horrifying.
Do you know how to tackle that one? Do you know how to tackle that one?
No,
now?
I don't. I'd love to know.
So you get your eyes moving. That's the bit you still can move. So you start moving your eyes around a little bit, and then like drop an anchor, one of our mindfulness techniques, then you get into your body and then you can come out of it. So go straight for your eyes.
Yes, that's a good. I'm already getting value, Johnny.
But yeah, it's horrendous. It's a horrible experience. I've had it a few times. I've had it like out of my body as well. I felt like I was out of my body in it as well. And yeah, some really strange ones. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying.
And then moving into sort of my 20s, I went through bouts of finding it extremely hard to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of just lie awake. Sometimes I'd say once every month or 2 months, I just wouldn't sleep for a whole night. And I would kind of just be just wide awake. And looking back, it was a busy mind. I was just overthinking things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I necessarily had sort of anxiety, but it was in that sort of category, I guess.
Yeah,
but I was sort of, I was running a different business at the time, and kind of kept thinking about everything and feeling I had to work. And sometimes I'd work all through the night, and it would just be horrendous for your sleep. And then the only other thing, bouts of overindulging with the booze and all the rest of it. And that obviously impacts your sleep massively as well. So, university and 20s had all that. Yeah. But now recently, working out how to get sleep when you've got a child, when you've got a baby, which is a completely different ball game.
Can you sleep in the times when you do have available time? Can you get to sleep at that point, or is your mind?
It's much better now. It's much better now. Some of I think part of the reason is when I'm just tired. I'm more tired. But the other reason is I have come up with some of my own personal techniques which have helped massively, and some of the stuff that we'll chat about in a moment. But it's helped me sort of park some of those thoughts, some of those to-do lists and whatever it might be, and be able to just sort of settle down. But I think what I was going to start off with was, it's really interesting, right? Because we're both new dads, and we know that what is extremely important for our children, for Ralph and little Frida, to have a good night's sleep, is if their bedtime routine is good, and you actually let them cognitively sort of wind down. If you think about it, you wouldn't dream of putting a baby to bed in the evening unless they've had a bath, unless they've had a story, unless they've had some chill time. You wouldn't just have them watching cartoons, turn it off, and then go to bed. And so often adults, that's the situation they're in. There is no kind of winding down of the brain. And there's so many different ways you can do it. But I'd love to know, first of all, how do you unwind the brain in the evening? And it's almost a bedtime routine, right?
And I think you're so right. I think that the more you struggle with sleep, the more you want to get a strict routine, including like times you go to bed, times you wake up. And there's different theories on all of this. There's one theory that the most important thing is wake up at the same time, but the time you go to bed, you go dependent on how tired you are. So you literally wait until you're tired and then go to bed and get up at the same time. And at first you'll be a bit more tired because you might not get as much sleep. You might get tired later, but the theory is it will correct itself in time. I like the one you're hinting at, where you just set up a nice routine, you kind of wind down. If I'm honest, for me right now, my wind down, I can do it very quickly. I can just sort of drop into a practice and do it. So I don't practice all I preach here, because, we're doing things like I'm working in the evenings, then I'm coming out of that, maybe putting Ralph to sleep if Lindsay hasn't got him off at that point. And then we're coming out of that, maybe watching a little TV together or hanging out together, and then going to bed. So that's not what I would advise, someone else to do. I would advise someone to, stop the screens early, stretch, do something relaxing, do something very low stimulation, But for myself, I really can mostly just hit the pillow and fall asleep. So I don't always, it's just time constraints right now. I mean, I don't have such a good routine always myself. But, what I would say to clients is, the worse your sleep is, the stricter we want the routine to be. And you want it to have, stuff that is low stimulation on the nervous system. You want to get the blue light down. You want to get caffeine stopped by midday. You want to, reduce sugar. You want to do all of that. You want to have your room in the right condition. You want your bed to be just for sleeping, not your fun. Well, you can do some fun activities there, and I'll leave that to your imagination. But in terms of screens and other activities, you don't want to do that, and you want to build an association with your bed that it's just relaxation or intimate time there and nothing else. And then, there are other things to do. But as you hinted at early on, you can do all of this and still struggle with sleep. So if you go to any of the sleep clinics in London, you'll find loads of people who are doing all this stuff and still can't sleep. You'll find, I find in my client work a lot, there's people who have done all of this stuff. They've got great sleep hygiene. They still can't sleep. And, I guess that's going to be, the meat of what we want to get into. But I think all the kind of core sleep hygiene stuff are good. They're helpful. And, the better your routine, the better. But they're not, sometimes people become so obsessed with that. A lot of threat and anxiety gets tagged onto, right, I've got to do my routine. I've got to do this and that. And if I don't, I won't sleep. And it builds up all this anxiety and pressure on sleep. And then, of course, your mind's ruminating about the worries that are in your life, or the worry of not being able to sleep. That's the common thing, right? You kind of begin with, you worry about life and stress, and then you notice you're not falling asleep, and then you go, oh my God, how am I going to function tomorrow?
I completely agree with that. And I think the sort of, obviously, for some people, obviously having a really strict routine can obviously help them and help them make progress. Yeah. But this sort of over-analysis, it becomes a worry in itself.
Yeah.
And these Whoop bands, these bands that people wear which track all their sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't need to wake up in the morning and look at my data to know whether I've got energy or not. I feel it. I know it. I know if I've had a good night's sleep. And I find that my view on those is that I think for some people, having too much data and too much, more technology associated with their body actually detunes them from being able to listen to what's going on. It's all about that data screen and not about listening to how you feel and responding to that. What are your views on that sort of technology?
I think so. Yeah, I think there are some people, like you say, that can manage it and it doesn't trigger worry and they just find it interesting. But I think a lot of people, it does trigger stress. As soon as you see that data and it's a bad night, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to cope? Even if you feel okay, because sleep is more of an average thing rather than the individual night data that's important. It's the kind of big picture that's more important often.
That's a great point.
We can cope with sleep deprivation pretty well. You'll know from your time in sports, many athletes don't sleep before big events, and they still compete at the highest level. And so we can cope with small amounts of it, but tracking the data, I think a little bit of tracking data could be okay, but I wouldn't do it on an ongoing basis myself. I don't see an advantage. I really love simplifying things and thinking about our ancestors. I love the kind of evolutionary psychology and thinking about, hunter-gatherers and how they sleep. And they do have rhythms and routines. They do things at certain times. They follow the sun and their circadian rhythms, and they do it that way. So I think to intuitively kind of do what works for you, following your natural rhythms is an important point as well. But yeah, I certainly, anyone I work with who's struggling with sleep, I would say don't track your data on how your sleep is, definitely.
Yeah, you don't need to be. It's like if someone wanted to lose a ton of weight and they're really overweight, you don't need to put a tape measure around their waist to tell them how overweight they are.
Because what's that going to do?
What's it going to do to their mindset? It's just about doing some of those healthier habits, getting them moving. It's the same with, like you said, implementing some of those routines. But let's dive into a big one, right? Anxiety.
Yeah.
What is anxiety, and how can this affect our sleep?
So it's a big question. A very short answer to what anxiety is, I see it as the cognitive processes of worry and the felt experience of anxiety, which has a whole spectrum from, physiological arousal and just stress right through to panic and dissociation and kind of the freeze response. Essentially, it's our fight, flight, freeze response, and it's more, the higher levels of activation. Another way of looking at it might be often the way we use anxiety is when that fight, flight, freeze response is not matching our world, actually what's going on around us. So our body's responding out of proportion with what's going on. So, we're reacting like the saber-tooth tigers in the room, but actually we're just struggling with sleep. I think, it's thoughts and any emotion is thinking, body sensations, and urges or action tendencies is those three things. And anxiety is, a combination of those. Often in the sleep context, what people mean with anxiety is often worry. So it's more the cognitive processes. It's like you said, you're thinking about your business, all the pressures on that. And worry can zoom in on one thing and loop round and round and round on that thing, or it can branch out and diverge, and it can pull in all things. So it goes from work to money to family to it does everything. And I love this metaphor for this as our mind's like an overly helpful friend. So it's trying to help us, but we've all had an overly helpful friend, right? And the more they interfere and get involved, the worse things get. And so a little bit of worry can be okay. It might motivate us to solve problems and do things, but it becomes an overly helpful friend, which disrupts sleep.
And how can you, if you're in that state of feeling anxious, and you get anxious in the evenings? I was speaking to a client the other day, and he was saying how his Sunday evening is just the worst time of the week, right? It's the worst time of the week. He's thinking about all the stuff he's got to do on Monday. He's thinking about all the stuff he didn't do last week, which we said that he was going to do. And so you're in that headspace of worrying about what you need to do, beating yourself up about what you didn't do, thinking you're not good enough, thinking you're not, then you might be projecting years ahead and thinking, what if I don't, what are some simple techniques that people can do if they're in that cloud before going to bed that can try and ease it or pull them out of it a little bit?
And I think that's so classic. So many people I work with, it's Sunday night. Of course, it's kind of obvious we're about to go into the week and we've had, maybe the break. And what you're describing there is worry, but it's also the big three really, which is worry, rumination, and judgment. These are the big three core pathological processes. So, worry is looking to the future and predicting the worst, right through to catastrophizing. Rumination is kind of going over the past and analyzing and asking why questions and trying to make sense of what's happened, but not in a way that leads to action. And then judgment is either the inner critic or the external critic. It's either attacking us or the world or other people. And all of those weave together and disrupt sleep. I see it as a two-step process. We want to use mindset skills to help with those thinking processes. And we also want to use action planning and problem solving to actually tackle what we can. So, do the action planning, problem solving quickly. It's a huge topic. We could talk about this for an hour, but very simply, it's get a pad of paper, set a timer, and do what is like worrying, but do it on paper in a very systematic way. So if it's action planning, you take your goal, you break it into the small steps, you think about what could get in the way and how you're going to cope with that. And then you stop there, and then you go very quickly into action. Whereas worry loops round and round and round, never leads to action. Action planning is very concrete within a time frame, and you're straight into action. Problem solving, very similar. You just list out all the potential solutions and then do a bit of pros and cons analysis, pick a solution, give it a go, and let life be the data. So I would do those two. You could do those on a Sunday night earlier with some of that stuff, but do it within a time frame. And then, okay, how do we then put that down? So with worry or any thinking process, we have two types of thoughts. We have the automatic, intrusive part, and we have the cognitive process. And the automatic, intrusive part, we can't do anything about. Worry just pings up. It's a natural thing. Rumination, judgment, they're all the same. They have a little bit of it's automatic. And what you do with that part is you just notice it with mindfulness. You just notice it and then focus back to where you want to put your attention. The second part is the bit we can control. So the ruminative cognitive process, the bit where like a worry thought comes in, God, what about my business? The bit where we join in is when we start going, right, okay, what are all the things that could go wrong and what's going to happen? And that stuff we can put down. It's a lot like mindfulness, when you're meditating on the breath, and then your mind gets pulled away into some thought loop, and then you notice that and you come back, you're dropping it, you're letting go of a thought. And we want to do the same with this. We want to kind of acknowledge the automatic and then notice when we've gone off and we're spinning the wheel and come back. And so in the context of sleep, where do we want to focus, as you're falling asleep? And, we could think about this during the day and then at night, but I'll do the sleep bit first. You could focus on many things. For me, I just relax and I focus on my body relaxing. I actually mindfully fall asleep quite often. I just watch my mind going through the layers, and it's quite a nice feeling. I feel that kind of sinking feeling, and I just, relax into it, and that's enjoyable. But you could also focus on, you could listen to something, something low, that doesn't engage you a lot. So like an audiobook that's quite gentle, or radio that's gentle, or music, that can be an option. But I like tools where you actually take your focus and you gently put it onto something. And we've talked before about gratitude practices. They're great things to focus on. So we do the same thing. We notice the worry is there. You acknowledge it. Okay, there's worry. Notice and name it. We could do drop-in anchor, which is a practice that we use a lot in our seminars. You can find it on the YouTube channel, on the Mindfulness Circle YouTube channel. So you do something like that, and then you refocus back onto your gratitude practice. The two gratitude practices I would say that are really good for sleep is the gratitude alphabet, my old favorite. You go through A to Z, thinking of something you feel grateful for each letter of the alphabet. You go really into detail. So I always use the example of animals because I love animals for A. So I'm grateful for animals like my dog Benji, or I'm grateful for animals like that time when I was on holiday and I saw that rhino, or, whatever. You go into a bit of detail on each thing. So it's quite a long process. Going through the whole alphabet takes quite a while. You're really engaging with it, and you're putting your focus on something gentle. Gratitude itself is proven to help with sleep. So that would be one. Or the other one is you do a gratitude review. So you think through the day, from the beginning of the day to falling asleep now, what are all the little things you feel grateful for? So there's some of my favorite techniques there.
That's interesting. I did a more sort of basic version of that, just kind of one night when I couldn't sleep and when my brain felt really busy. I just kind of had a piece of paper, put a line down the middle. On the left, I wrote down all the things that I was worried about, angry about, any kind of like negative thoughts I'd sort of put on that side, or even like things I've really got to do and all the rest of it. And then on the right side, I wrote down all the positive things. Basically what you're talking about, a process of gratitude. And I think like putting things on paper is just so powerful. It's such a simple thing. And I think it's very easy when you hear these things, because a lot of these words are like gratitude, right? It's a buzzword. It's written about, it's talked about a lot. And some people I think roll their eyes, and I certainly did at one point. Oh yeah, that again. But until you've actually tried it and tried something consistently, don't rule it out until you've done that. And I think that there's sort of untapped potential in sort of you at the beginning forcing yourself to really kind of go through that process. But gratitude, I mean, so it's obviously something that we've talked about a lot on morning mindset and things like that. And as a way to kind of help with anxiety, what's the sort of what's going on when you're processing gratitude? What's going on in the body? What's
Yeah.
going on in the brain?
Yeah. So, gratitude is this ancient value. You see it across all human cultures, all societies. I was talking about hunter-gatherers earlier, and, our ancestors from the Paleolithic era and epoch. Their whole culture was built around gratitude. Every time you killed something, you had a ritual of gratitude. Every part of their day, that they're grateful to the seasons, to everything around it. It's kind of deep within us, this process of gratitude. You see it in every culture across the world, or every religion, and beyond religions, just human culture as well. And I think that what it does physiologically is many things. So it kind of improves heart rate variability, which is this marker of the balance between the two branches of the nervous system, and you want a kind of responsive heart rate variability, and so it needs to be changing and varying quite a bit, and you see that improve with gratitude. You see blood pressure come down, you see the relaxation response. I mean, essentially you are engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response with it, and that's going to help with sleep.
Yeah.
It brings down inflammation in the body. It even repairs your telomeres, so that the caps on the end of your DNA. Does so many wonderful things. But you're right, people resist it. And I would say all of this stuff comes down to, I'm a big advocate of acceptance and commitment therapy, and we talk about workability in that. Workability means, is what I'm doing taking me towards the life I want to live? And if it is with sleep, then you don't need to change anything. You don't need to try gratitude. If you fall asleep, fine. You don't need to do it. But if you're struggling, then give it a go. And then if the resistance comes up, okay, that's interesting, because gratitude is not saying there isn't pain in life and there isn't difficulty. And, gratitude is just turning towards what is supportive alongside that, to help us through the difficult times. And we want to try it, give it a go, and see if it helps. But you're right, many times your mind will resist it, and your mind will resist all the stuff around sleep. Brains do that for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes they just don't like change. If you've watched Netflix till 2 a.m. for a long time, you're not going to want to stop doing that because it has some reward. You feel good doing it to some degree in the moment. Even though long-term picture, it's making you feel worse typically. So it's hard to change these kind of habits, and gratitude's the same. Our mind will resist it. It'll come in with, if we're naturally skeptical, it'll come in with skepticism. If for some people it might be more you get distracted. For other people, it could even trigger worry. Starting to express gratitude, your mind will go on to worry. And this is where it's a training process of noticing that and coming back. Noticing and coming back, and that's what will really help with sleep, is noticing that worry and not feeding it with those extra thoughts.
And I've heard you talk about this before, but not sort of judging yourself. If you're trying to do something to improve your sleep, and you're not going to get it right necessarily. First of all, it's just about going through the process and not being like, oh, I can't even do that. And just like small, gentle changes. We don't want to change too much. So if you're, I often work with people who, they feel depressed or anxious during the day, and then at nighttime they might actually feel a little bit better. So they end up staying up late, enjoying something, TV, video games, something like that, one of their hobbies. And, they actually get a bit of a relief from it. So that's why they're doing that pattern. Then the next day they feel awful. And with someone like that, I wouldn't say make a big change. Like, let's not try and get, you're going to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Let's just nudge it back. Let's just edge it the right direction. So I think that's another core principle with sleep, is just little gradual changes and seeing what happens when you do it. And I think that the judgment piece, you're right, because our mind will judge us about all kinds of things, including sleep, because our mind, again, is the overly helpful friend. It's trying to make us do better. It wants us to keep up with our group, our tribe, so it's going to beat us up to try and get us to do better. And that that works a tiny bit at times. The
The stick at times does motivate the donkey, but after 10 years of that, you have a depressed, broken donkey. Whereas we want to use carrots, like the positive motivation to change these things. So make a little change on sleep and then congratulate yourself, actually acknowledge it and say, yeah, I did well. I went to bed 20 minutes earlier. That's a good thing. But the judgment, I think, just a little bit more on that in my mind, because I think, that judgment triggers the stress response. So if you're lying in bed being self-critical and you measured your physiology, it's pushing you into the fight or flight response. So you're less likely to sleep. So we want to bring in self-compassion as well. That's the other piece here is, okay, can I give myself self-compassion in my thinking? How I talk to myself in my mind? Can I say kind, supportive things? Acknowledge that it's tough not being able to sleep, and that I'm trying the best I can, and that I'll just lie here, rest, and see what happens. I don't have to sleep either. So self-compassion would be another core tool as well.
Thank you, Johnny. That's really interesting and great. The other side of this kind of discussion is other people who. And I've noticed actually myself, sometimes I have done this, whereby it becomes part of your identity. So the fact that you don't get good sleep, it becomes part of your identity.
Yeah.
And by telling people, I'm hardly sleeping at the moment, you get a reaction.
Yeah.
You get support, which kind of feeds something, right?
Yeah.
And then so there's that part, but then also there's that sort of narrative that people tell themselves when they haven't been sleeping in a while, that they just can't sleep. They're just not a good sleeper. And so it's almost like a limiting belief as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And that seems to me like something which you can't even think about the other stuff until you've overcome that limiting belief that you can have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, and I think we change belief in multiple ways, and the core way is through behavior. So changing your behavior, then your brain updates the belief later. So doing all we're talking about today will help with that. But you're right, that can be different things. So, if you're more suffering with your mental health, the reason you don't sleep is because our ancestors were very vulnerable at night. It's when a lot of the predators came. So it's adaptive to not sleep well at times of threat. So as soon as you're in your threat mode, you start getting that pattern at night. And then that can build up over long periods of time if you struggle with anxiety and depression over a long period. And that can feel a bit of your identity. But we want to work on the anxiety and depression in the day and hopefully improve that. And then over time, it might shift it. But then there's the other side of it, like you're saying, where it's more a pride, and I think we've all done it, right? You'll have done it. You've had, a long period of sleep deprivation, and you're doing loads of amazing work, really focused on a business, really engaged, and you can work through it, right? And you can exercise through it as well. You keep training, and you get a bit of a pride from that, because that's like, it's an achievement, and we don't see the impact of it either. In the short term, we're not seeing the damage that this last 16 months has done to our brain, which unfortunately, if you study sleep science, you realize that it's a myth that anyone can survive without sleep. That there are all these historical figures who slept 4 hours or whatever, but, it had a cost. It does damage your brain over time. And the problem with that is as soon as you say that, it puts a lot of pressure on sleep. And if you're struggling, then you're going to be going, oh my God, I'm impacting my health as well. But I think you're right. We can all have a bit of pride in it. I've felt it as well. I've had days I've worked with 8 clients and done a workshop and had 3 hours sleep the night before. And I've been, I've fallen into that trap of going, oh God, aren't I doing great? But we want to kind of reverse that narrative of like, actually, no, short term, we might be doing great, but long term, we've got to do everything we can to improve sleep.
The idea that sleep is the ultimate form of self-care.
Yeah, it's becoming fashionable, right? Who'd have thought it? You got people like Ariana Huffington and people like that all promoting the sleep agenda, because the science is pretty undeniable that it will improve function on everything, really, everything you want to do. And and then, okay, so how do we deal with the fact that that then triggers, I'm not sleeping and it's having a cost? Well, it's back to how we work with worries in the day or at nighttime. Just notice your mind doing that and then come back to your focus point. So come back to your gratitude practice, come back to your relaxing and lying there, come back to listening to the audio book or the podcast or something like that. And you can do things like you can get out of bed. If you've tried for 20 minutes, get out of bed, do something really boring, read the dictionary. When you start to feel tired, go back to bed. A lot of people talk about doing that, so you can do that kind of thing as well. But the final one on this, I really wanted to get in today, was acceptance is the key one. That beyond anything for me is like the kind of the core technique here, because you can try everything, all the tools, all the sleep hygiene, and you're still not sleeping. You're exercising, you're eating right, you're doing all of this stuff, you're not sleeping right. We've got to move into acceptance. And what that means is just lying there and just saying to yourself, it's okay that I'm not sleeping. I can be with this. It's okay. And what can help with that is acknowledging that we do sleep. You know, even the nights you feel like you're asleep, you're awake all night. If we measured your brain waves, they're still dipping into sleep a little bit. So even when you feel awake, because you can't, you know, if you deprive people of sleep for a very short amount of time, you see all kinds of problems, and people eventually die. So you are sleeping, even if you feel like one night I'm not sleeping, there is some sleep there. So acceptance is, okay, it's good for me just to lie here and relax. Even if my mind is really busy, just watch that, just observe my mind doing what it does, relax my body, just soften, do some acceptance and self-compassion, self-talk. I'm okay, I can get through this, I can survive. And then that acceptance of that is often the thing I find with people then gets them into sleep. People who really struggle with it, you know, doing the acceptance.
That's so interesting, and it's when you're talking it's a lot to do with sort of behaviour change as well, isn't it? I mean, when you're away from sleep, you know, when people you look into sort of whether it's alcohol or whatever it might be, but that sort of process of acceptance of your situation, trying not to judge yourself, and then having some self-compassion, and then taking some steps.
Carl Rogers said the curious paradox is the more I accept myself, the more able I am to change. And I think it's a brilliant take. You know, acceptance doesn't mean you don't do the change part. You know, you can still work on your sleep, but you're going to get more result doing it from a place of acceptance than judgment.
Amazing. So look, to summarize, let's just spitball here. Give me a little mindful bedtime routine. So you've touched on it already. So we've got some acceptance. I'm lying there, Johnny. Okay, I'm lying there thinking about everything. It's already midnight, and I'm trying to get to sleep. What's a little process I can do in my head to kind of help me?
Yeah. So what I would do is I would begin with just acknowledging that. So just notice it. And if it's really difficult, name it as well. So just say, okay, I am noticing worry. I am noticing stress. You know, put a label on it. And then come back to your body by relaxing your whole body. So just go head to toe, relaxing each muscle group piece by piece. Even that can take quite a while if you do it really slowly. And then engage in what you're doing. So here you could continue to just relax and just notice your mind, but try to reduce how much you join in. You know, notice the automatic worry, but try to just observe it rather than getting on board with it. It's like you're on the riverbank looking at the water, you know, rather than in the stream splashing around. Or you could, if that still feels difficult, get a focus point in there. So listen to something, do a gratitude practice, do you know, something that's gentle, and just put your focus on it. And when your mind goes on to the worries, you notice and come back. That would be, you know, my kind of core process, really.
Amazing. Yeah, you mentioned the body scan, and I heard something the other day that the US military they do sleep training because obviously it's incredibly important to be able for the military to get as much sleep as possible. They know the repercussions of not having enough sleep, and they'll often be in situations where they will be sleep deprived. So when they do get sleep, they need it. And they did an experiment where for 6 weeks, everyone was doing body scans every night. And there was a 98% success rate for people to say that they significantly improved their sleep. But it is that persistence. You know, it's coming back to it, practicing it, making it something that you revert to rather than, oh God, here we go, another night, I'm not going to sleep, you know. Try and practice those techniques.
And often the problem you see at night is reflective of the day. So if we spend all day worrying, ruminating, self-judgment, that will show up at night. So also tackle it downstream as well. You know, do the same drop-in anchor practice throughout the day when your mind is worrying through the day. And you know, do the action planning, problem solving on paper.
That's such a good point, because actually we don't give ourselves often space in the day to think about these things. We go from one task to the next, or we distract ourselves with social media or whatever it might be. And then suddenly in the evening, it's the first chance in the day that you've had a chance to think about some of the bigger things. And so, you know, that it lights your brain up when it should be chilling out. So spending some time in the day, making time for those practices, I'm sure would help massively as well. Right?
Definitely.
All right, Johnny, thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Good to talk with you, Rob, and good to see everyone joining us. I hope everyone has a good night's rest tonight. Hopefully I will.
Right, buddy, take care. Thanks
See
so much,
guys.
See ya.
Bye.